That group of people, which numbered less than 5% of the workforce, in the most advanced countries, the US and Europe, just 100 years ago, when most people were still employed in agriculture. That group of people, which numbered just 10% of the workforce in the year 1950, that group of people, which numbered just 15% of the workforce in 1980, has in the United States grown to more than 40 million workers, a third of the workforce. But in Israel, it has grown far larger. In Israel, that group of people has grown to more than 1.5 million people, more than 40% of the workforce, the 13th largest concentration of the creative class, ahead of the United States, ahead of Canada, bested only by the Northern European nations in Scandinavia, Sweden, Holland, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and Singapore, and various others. More than 40% of your workforce, one of the leading percentages in the world, now employed and working in this creative class. I'm sure you know this, but my studies convince me that Israel has already become not only a startup nation, not only a high-tech nation, but I implore you to consider this. Israel is a creative nation. What defines Israel more? Its excellence in technology and innovation, of course it is. Its ability to generate startups and send them to the NASDAQ, of course. We heard the music. We looked at the culture. We toured the city. The essence of Israel, which positions its economy, is a creative ferment. A creative ferment that cuts across all domains, that makes us all the same. Whether we play music, or work in the arts, or entertainment, or media, or science, or technology, or are an entrepreneur, I submit to you that Israel is one of the world's leading examples of a creative economy. Our projections, by the way, our projections suggest that the creative economy is in its infancy. It is just emerging. In fact, in a book I wrote called The Great Reset, I argue that this economic crisis that we are living through is the inflection point. All of us are living through the Great Transformation. It is if we are in Marx's shoes, watching the decline of the feudal order and the birth of the industrial order, de novo. Today we are watching the passing of the industrial age, and you know it, the decline of bureaucracy, the tragedy of the large corporation, the focus on entrepreneurship and the individual, the creative imperative and the creative shift. In its infancy, we are projecting that the creative economy will generate millions upon millions of more jobs already in the epicenters, in the locational epicenters of the creative economy. 50 and 60 and 70% of the workforce are employed in these domains in great global cities. And get this, while the rate of unemployment in capitalism during the crisis surged in countries above 10, 15, 20%, in manufacturing 20, 25, 30, 40, and 50% or more in some nations of Europe, the rate of unemployment amongst the creative class in the United States, in Israel, in most other advanced countries, never topped 4%. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our future. It's the only future we have. Our future is not going to rest in harnessing and tending the soil anymore. It's not going to rest in pumping oil and natural resources out of the ground. In fact, and I've written and debated Thomas Friedman on this, the greatest resource-based economies, cities like Houston, Calgary, Alberta in Canada, have taken those resources and used them as fuel for the knowledge economy. They've overturned the resource curse by using resources to build knowledge. It's not going to rest anymore on making goods and trading things. Here's a statistic for you. Do you know how many people are now members of the industrial working class in the advanced countries, in Israel, in the United States, in Canada, in the advanced countries of Europe and Asia? If we take all the transportation workers, all the maintenance workers, all the people who work in moving and logistics, if we take all those people and add them together, and all the people who build houses and buildings, together with the people who make things, we're now less than 1 in 5 workers. If you count the people who make things, who are directly involved in production, that number is less than 5%. It is exactly the same number as were involved in agriculture in the 1940s and 50s. Ours is a creative age. And it has to inform everything we do, the core of our economic development strategy. Who counts these people other than my research group? Who counts them? How do we benchmark them? We must. How do we understand how they cluster and concentrate? They are our future. We have to understand their trajectory. We have to understand how we get there, and it has to inform our transportation strategy, our economic strategy, our regional strategy, our trade strategy, our tourism strategy. And I will submit to you that in terms of tourism, one of the great shifts in innovative tourism we must make is understanding that the creative class, the knowledge workers, the mind workers, the creative workers, the entrepreneurs, the independent thinking free agents who shape our economy need not to lay in the sun on a beach and not just to play golf by a resort. They don't want to chill out. And let me give you the example of my father. My father was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1921. He had to go to work in the 7th grade in 1934 when he was 13 years old to help support his family. My dad went to work in the factories of Newark, New Jersey when he was 13 years of age. He then stormed the beaches at Normandy as an infantry soldier and helped win the war against Germany. My dad went and worked in a factory for his entire life. When my dad came home from work, working with his back and his brawn all day, focused on educating, giving a good education to his 2 boys, myself and my brother, my dad didn't want mental stimulation. He wanted to turn on the television, open a can of beer, and watch his favorite team, the New York Yankees or the New York Giants. His stimulation was physical stimulation at work, and it made sense. For him, vacation was doing nothing. He had enough hard work on his job. But the creative person is different. The creative person has always been different. Now, in the past, there was a minority. I told you there was 5%. There was the great scientists, the great thinkers, the philosophers, the artists, the bohemians. Always a little odd, you know, always a little eccentric. Always wanted to live in communities like Jerusalem or Haifa or like the Greenwich Village in New York or San Francisco's bohemian areas or the left bank of Paris, the bohemian quarters of London. But they always wanted continuous stimulation. They wanted an environment that not necessarily stimulated them in their line of work, but stimulated their mind in every dimension. They wanted to be part of an energized scene. That's the transformation we're beginning to see in tourism. And that's the transformation that Jerusalem is leading. How to create a touristic experience, an enriched experience that is about history and authenticity and culture. You see, in the world we live, which is filled with the generic, when I teach my students from all over the world, from Israel, from Europe, from Asia, from the Middle East, from India, from the United States, they all increasingly look and talk and consume the same exact bundle of goods. We all eat each other's foods. We all wear the same clothes. We all drive the same cars. We all shop in many of the same shops. What creative people are looking for in a place is not the generic, but the authentic. but the authentic and the real, because in a highly mobile society, in a society where talent can move and go where they want to be, the authentic and the creative is a key draw. Now I've told you about the rise of this new kind of creative economy and of this new creative class. I've given you a glimmer of how tourism is changing and must change to fit this. But there's another side of the story I want to share with you. And a side of the story that positions Jerusalem and Israel even better to compete and win in the creative age. You see, in a technology and trading world, in a global environment, one of the things that we've confused collectively, all of us, and our thought leaders, is that place would cease to be important. That community had lost meaning. The Economist wrote headlines, "The End of Geography." Tom Friedman has told each and every one of us, the world is flat. The world is flat. In a flat world, you can be anywhere and prosper. Now, that's true for many of the things that the old industrial age depended on. If you want to make this jacket, or my shoes, or parts of an automobile, these electronic components, if you need to take call centers to process or deliver or ask for service on an item, all of those routine things can be moved around like pieces on a chessboard to the places where labor is cheap enough and docile enough and malleable enough. But for the important things, the really important things, the science and technology that Israel has excelled at, those startup companies, those epicenters of creativity, those are not flat at all. Those are incredibly clustered, like Professor Michael Porter says. They are incredibly concentrated. In my words, the world is not only flat. At the same time that it is flat, it is also spiky. And the world of creativity is taking shape around a finite number of supercities, megacities, and megaregions. These are the places that define the new world economy. If there are some 200 nations in the world, there are 40 great megaregions, like the Boston, New York, Washington corridor, like the area around Greater London, like the area around Greater Tokyo, Seoul. I could go on. It's not China that's the new competitor. It's the axis of Beijing and Shanghai. It's not India that's the new one on the block. It's the Mumbai-Bangalore corridor. It's not Brazil and the so-called BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. It's the corridor from Sao Paulo to Rio de Janeiro. And you too are part of a megaregion that runs from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and extends its borders outward. These megaregions, hubbed by great airports, great conurbations of people who are migrating from all over the world, become the spikes of economic activity, the driving forces of economic growth. And through my research with great teams at the University of Toronto and NYU, we have tried to probe what makes these great spikes of economic activity tick. I have a simple formula, which I will share with you. I call it the 3 T's of economic development. And we also add a 4th T, a special 4th T. The first T of economic development you understand well. In this city and in this country, you have pioneered it. Technology. In order to be a growth mecca, in order to be an economic powerhouse, you need to be a technology leader. You need to make investments in great research and development universities.